this next session, we are going to talk about a new vision for Europe, and we will have a very special guest here coming on stage. And he is not only an economist, a former EU commissioner, but is also currently serving as the co-chair of the International Resource Panel. I'm very delighted that he will share his knowledge and his vision with us today. Please give him a loud round of applause, Janez Potocnik.
Good day to everybody, and it's a real pleasure to be here. I see many known faces, which is excellent. I don't know if that's easier to talk or more difficult, but whatever. I learned the title of my presentation when I entered this room. So basically, Maza told me, talk whatever you wish about. And that's what I will talk about, living well within planetary boundaries, and why actually system change is so important. So let me start with the same. So it will be a journey through my 3 countries. And I will start with my most beloved country, Slovenia, with somebody you might know because he was quite provocative in Germany a few days ago. And he said, Slavoj Žižek is our famous philosopher, it's clear that we are approaching the ecological and digital apocalypse, but we should not lose nerves. And he was actually continuing in his own way, everything under heaven, it's an utter chaos. So the situation is excellent. No, I prefer to stay here, it's fine, yeah. So let us look what is the utter chaos of the 21st century. We all got used to that figure, that we will be 9.7 till mid of the century. That means in 1 year, you will have on the planet population of Germany additionally. In 9 days and 6 hours, population of my country. The world richest 1% have more than twice as much wealth as 6.9 people, and 22 richest men have more wealth than 326 million women in Africa. We throw away 1/3 of the food we produce. Approximately half of the cities which will be existing in 2050 have not yet been built. Biodiversity, according to WWF, our planet wildlife populations, mammals, birds, and amphibians, have seen 96% drop at average since 1970. 1 million of plastic bottles are bought every minute. 9% recycled, 12 incinerated, and 80% more or less ending in nature. Health, I don't need to talk to you about the COVID and experiences. I will finish with that at the end. Artificial intelligence. Elon Musk recently, AI has the potential to become the most disruptive force in history. There will come a point where no job is needed. And climate change, I guess after this summer, I don't need to tell you anything. So this is the chaos of the 21st century, which we have to manage. You have all heard about the donut. So inner part of the circle are simply the human needs, which are, of course, expanding, and outer part are planetary boundaries, which unfortunately we cannot expand. So this is the story of very recently, some month ago, it was published the last evaluation when, for the first time, we have evaluated all 9 planetary boundaries, and 6 are already crossed. But if you would look to divergent national context, you would find out that there are countries which are pretty much, which are not crossing planetary boundaries, and there are, of course, countries which are enormously. But it's one interesting thing, if you notice here, Belgium and Australia have the same per capita GDP. So it's possible to do it in different way. So if you would try to pack all the countries of the world together, then the first group would be countries which are living inside this, which are not yet crossing the planetary boundaries, but not also reaching the social thresholds. The second group are the countries which are developing fast, already crossing planetary boundaries, but on a way to reach also the social thresholds. Unfortunately, the right thing starts first and then comes the other. And finally, these are all countries where we belong, all European countries, where we are transgressing planetary boundaries, but also living well. So the Club of Rome has very nicely said that we have moved from so-called empty world, which was dominated by nature, to the full world, which is now dominated by us, by humans. In the empty world, it was labor and infrastructure which were the limiting factors of the human well-being, while in the full world, it's actually natural resources and environmental things. So even if you want to talk economics of the future, that's what you have to talk about, because that will be determining the human well-being. To summarize this first part, we are the first generation ever on this planet living in socio-ecological space of planetary scope. So even the Second World War was not planetary scope. There were regional wars, but the threat became planetary when nuclear weapon was invented. But we have COVID, we have now climate change, we have internet, all that is global. And that means that we are more interconnected and interdependent than ever. And it also means that our responsibility for managing all that has enormously increased individually and also collectively. So let me now go more to the bread and butter of what we are doing in IRP, that's the resource story. Let me start with this. This is the biomass of animals. You will see, it's working, but these are humans here. And we are a pretty small part of animals. But if you compare then animals inside the overall biomass of life, you will find fungi, bacteria, plants, and so on. You would find that the biomass of animals is rather small. But the point which I want to share with you is this one. On the left-hand side, you have biomass of life. On the right-hand side, you have anthropogenic mass. Mass created by us, by humans. So from concrete to bricks, aggregates, to the metals, asphalt, and other. And according to estimates, this will be, till 2040, triple size of the left side. So when we talk about natural resources in IRP, what we actually talk about? Biomass, metals, fossil fuels, non-metallic minerals, and we call all that materials. So everything extracted from Earth are materials. And on the top of that, you have water and land. So, by the way, today I will be first time talking about Global Resource Outlook 24, because it will be released only in February. So, but data are all from, because it's already in the peer review and it's finished, more or less. So global material use has, since 1970, almost increased by a factor of 4. A lot has, due to urbanization and industrialization, but population growth, it's also an important factor. Importantly, when you look to those 4 parts of materials, you see that the non-metallic minerals are increasing in share, which it's of course due to the building of the cities and infrastructure in high developing, quickly developing countries. Then that's a particularly interesting picture, because it's actually what are the drivers of material footprint. And let us go region by region. Europe and North America, net effect is practically 0. But you can see in Europe, for example, technology has already an important part, and affluence, that's economic activity, is actually balancing that. So you might conclude from that that technology will do the trick, but it's false, because technology will do the trick only if you are already few times surpassing planetary boundaries. So the base is too high, so we would need to go much, much down. But North America has pretty much the same story. Then Africa, West Asia, you can see that population growth is the one which is actually core part of their development and impact on the material footprint. And then Asia and Pacific and Southern Europe, where you basically see the economic growth as being the core driver of the material footprint increase. So when you look then to the world, basically the situation is minor impact of technology, -5, but huge impact of economy, 40, and important impact of population growth. That's basically the story. So now let us look to the impacts of extraction and processing of natural resources, which actually, according to us, drives all aspects of the triple planetary crisis. 60% of global climate change impacts, including land use change, can be devoted to that. 40% of air pollution, health impacts, and more than 90% of water stress, global land and water eutrophication-related biodiversity loss. You could find here also then value-added and workforce according to these kind of sector groups which are there. So it's a story on one slide where you see how the various kind of materials are impacting and how much it's actually connected to the economic activity. So if current trends would continue, global material consumption is predicted to double by 2060. That's why we do believe that the only way, if we want to thrill and live within planetary boundaries in the future, is to decouple our economic development and in particular well-being from the growth of resource use and both from environmental impacts. Let me now talk about, this is more about picture, put you in the picture. Now let's talk about solutions. So what is actually circular economy? Because we are all talking about that today. Circular economy, it's an instrument. So it's an instrument for delivering decoupling I was talking about, but if you think it a bit more strategically, it's actually more than that. It's actually a kind of societal, economic, cultural transformation, which we would need to do to reorganize our economic systems in particular if we would want to align them with European Green Deal and Sustainable Development Goals, philosophy and approach. So I have actually introduced it, that was 2014, June. So next year will be 10 years. And what is interesting that at the moment it was rejected even by the next commission, but today, in less than 10 years, it's a global concept. It's really a global concept, so it's accepted everywhere. And this is logical. Why? Because circular bioeconomy is the oldest concept on the planet Earth. Nature, it's organized according to circularity, so everything there has its purpose, nothing is lost. And so the only question which we should ask, which has in theory quite straight answer, is are we humans part of nature? But unfortunately, in practice, that answer is not so more straightforward. This is something which you all know. So different ways of how we can talk about circularity. Since I know where it was introduced on 3 and 4. And now it's moving to 2, but we are not yet at 1. So we are not yet there. And because this needs a systemic understanding. So we moved from waste to products, and we were today already discussing the products, but we haven't yet moved to the systems. So what we have to understand is that we actually don't need cars. We need mobility. We don't need light bulbs. We need light. We don't need chairs. We need to sit. We don't need refrigerators. We need chilled and healthy food. We don't need CDs. We want to listen to the music. We don't need pesticides. We want healthy plants. So dematerialization, rethinking ownership, efficiency complemented by sufficiency is the essence of the story. So, but here I would just like to remind you on 2 kind of ways you should look to demand and sufficiency. So we can reduce demand, and I'm talking here about energy and materials, from consumption as well as from production side. From consumption side, it's no-brainer. If you use something less, you are reducing it, yeah? But you can do it also from the production side. If you deliver the same human needs by using less energy and less materials, you basically don't question the human need, but you can do it. And by the way, the core problem is that our current economic system is entirely resource intensive. We don't care because it's easier and cheaper getting new than actually doing anything else. So the core question which we are asking in IRP is this one: how to meet human needs in most energy and resource efficient way? Which are the main blind spots? I will try to explain it through climate story, why the things are not moving where they should move. First, we all lack collectively a kind of systemic approach and thinking. In all the governments are organized that nobody's actually, government departments compete between each other instead of cooperate. So we are in environment winning against the growth. No, we are both losing. Immediately when you go that way, you are both losing. So one typical example is, if I'm the climate, so looking to making greenhouse gas emissions 2050 net zero for whatever it will cost. By the way, that will cost us a lot. And we will have to deal with a lot of things. And I will try to explain later on critical raw materials, how this story actually would come and where it's going if we go that way. Second is, we don't go enough to the reasons, to the drivers and pressures, meaning natural resources and market signals. What is actually driving us when we decide on the markets? This is from International Energy Agency. According to them, if we want to do the energy transition on the supply side, when we want to become renewable, blah, 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 reaching net zero by 2050 will require about 6 times today critical mineral use by 2040. But also on demand side, electric vehicle use close to 10 times the material of conventional cars. So it's no-brainer that there will be a huge pressure on new critical materials. But when we look to the solutions, we basically look it through 3 pillars. I will start from back. So we are obviously recognizing the new need, and the immediate conclusion is we have to geographically disperse and we need to open new mines, but those mines should be organized and operated in as much as possible environmentally friendly way, and more of the value added which is created should be actually staying within the origin regions and countries, because that's one of the problems of this colonialism in which we are still kept today, which is all fine and needed. Then we are saying, okay, then for those products which are containing these critical raw materials, and remember, critical raw materials are those where we recognize the gap between future demand and current need, in current possibilities. There we will recycle, and we should recycle those products. I have to say that if you would recycle today's batteries, and if the needs of the batteries in 10 years would be here 10 times higher, that's the capacity of recycling, nothing. So the real capacity, it's only in system change. So looking how to organize mobility in different way, how to organize housing in different way, so that then you would need less energy and less materials. The other is locking yourself in solutions which will land in for example, when it comes to materials, deep sea mining, when it comes to energy, how to get energy from biofuels, or how to hide CO2. So these will be the solutions you will search for, because we will not see the way through to get enough energy and then materials. So, and then going to market signals, this is a bit, excuse me, because I'm also professor of economics, I have to excuse in advance for this slide. So, normally what is a common understanding is that the signals which we are getting are driving the quantities and the decisions which we do. But what are the signals? Production capital, financial, overvalued, over-rewarded. Human capital, undervalued, under-rewarded. Natural capital, in majority of the cases, not valued and not rewarded. Does somebody really believe that we will get from that economic, social, and environmental balance? It's simply not possible. As long as the signals will remain as they are, this will not happen. So, in what situation we are currently living? we are adopting a regulation to limit our behavior and behavior of the companies, but the market signals are telling to the companies, no, come on, that's actually not in your interest because you will lose something. And that's why they are actually lobbying in Brussels. That's why they are prolonging any change, because it's against market. And we need to start aligning that. As consumer, when anybody is approaching you, you have to buy the things, for example, food, which is environmentally friendly and more healthy, but it's double price. So it's like you would, in economic faculty, teach people, okay, forget what I was saying before, act stupid, because that's how you will get more healthy. So we need to align the signals. This is, I'm calling it the global hypocrisy indicator. It's IMF figures about fossil fuel subsidies. Believe it or not, they were the biggest last year. So how? After 20 years, the whole world talking about climate change, the subsidies for fossil fuels are the biggest 2022. And finally, the last spot, it's lack of demand-side focus. So we all try to clean up the supply side. What is the problem of that? It is actually, if you look at it from this energy perspective, you see that fugitive emissions from energy production are less than 6%. But then when you look, so energy, it's core and most important, but you have to look where it's spent, in buildings, in transport, in industry, the biggest. So the core question is how to make the rat smaller. And then everything will be easier. So why this is so important? If you don't go on the demand side, you are first missing important opportunities for fight against climate change. And second, you will lose the global south because you don't ask who is actually consuming most and who is actually overshooting planetary boundaries. So then you want to sit at the COPs and discuss those issues, you will lose them. The only thing which you will get is more loss and damage, which they will request financial transfers. And they are right, because we don't look into the mirror. So that's the summary of this part. If you want to avoid extinction of elephants in nature, we must first extinct elephants in our rooms. So that's basically, which is leading me. So with some friends from here, we tried to think in that way, and we call it system change compass. So what are the transformations which are needed, policy? Then we have introduced the real economy and actually the human needs, and then the investment opportunities, and all with policy advice. So it was a lot of that. This is just like a teaser which you see. If you are interested, go to the internet page and find it. And by the way, we are in the final phase now in Brussels to establish World Resource Institute Climate Kick, Systemic, Club of Rome, and Metabolic, something which we will call System Transformation Hub, which will try to unpack exactly in a way like I have explained before, all the questions which are still unpacked. Which leads me finally to the Global Resource Outlook 24. So we will look to the questions exactly in a way I have explained. So we talk about provisioning systems, because the current logic is both ethically and ecologically unsustainable, and because that way it's giving you much more cross-sector innovation possibilities than actually the sectorial way of looking to the questions. So these are types of analytical pictures you will get. I will not go into detail because simply it will be time-consuming. On the left-hand side, you see how much are various kind of provisioning systems contributing. On the right-hand side is the story of the biodiversity. So one thing from the first pillar you can see is that we are definitely putting too little attention to the food system. So we talk a lot about build and mobility, but food system, it's one of the core systems which we will have to manage. This is the 22-year story, so I will again not go into detail. Before, you have seen the same slide which was talking about various kind of materials. Here it's about provisioning systems, human needs. Why that's important? And today we have already had some discussions about that. Mobility system and if you go the current way, if you optimize sectoral output, measure and aim to maximize GDP, so replacing combustion with electric vehicles, this leads to increased infrastructure and land use due to economic and population growth, additional roads, new charging points, additional parking spaces, but it has also very positive impacts. That is maximizing value of used materials and reduce climate impacts and pollution. But still, the question of time lost in traffic, it's still there. If you go human needs way, then first you optimize well-being, not GDP. You go to reduce need of everything, and of course, optimized infrastructure, modal shifts, reduced land use, higher utilization, health and well-being impact. So blue is actually the way to go. Red is the way we go. But it has positive effects, yeah, but it's absolutely not optimal from the resource and energy point of view. Then we are more than till now looking to equity and justice related implications, because it's quite clear that high-income countries have the problem, but not only high-income countries, but highest consumers everywhere in all countries. And let us skip that. So this is the story. If we look through the climate optic, on the upper part you see the overshoot of emissions. On the lower part, the multidimensional climate vulnerability. So this is typically when you do income groups comparison. You see high-income countries versus the other countries. And finally, we will be introducing sustainability transition scenario, which will exactly try to address resource efficiency, climate, energy story through modeling provisioning systems lenses. And on the top of that, we are adding the just transition. I have the results, but I will not talk about them. Just one thing for you to remember: a pathway towards sustainable resource use exists, is possible, but we urgently must change the direction and fix the broken compass. So, finally, about solutions: institutionalize resource governance, define resource use path, which means targets, redirect finance to serve the transition, make trade an engine of sustainable development, create low-carbon, clean, circular business models, correct market signals to mainstream sustainable production and consumption, and focus on most resource-intensive provisioning systems. This is the quick recipe what to do. To conclude, so the wise man said, the world has enough for everyone's need, but not for everyone's greed. The Club of Rome has already in 1972 basically said, unlimited material growth and consumption on a finite planet would eventually lead to collapse and decline. But what are the core messages from our publication 50 years after that? There are two scenarios which were analyzed: too little, too late, and the giant leap. And the giant leap is the fastest economic transformation in history. And there are two conclusions which are really dramatic. One is social tipping points will be reached before environmental tipping points. You can't do environmental transition without simultaneously doing social transition, because people will simply not be ready about regenerative economy and decarbonization. And second is that even in giant leap scenario, climate change stabilizes only at below 2 degrees Celsius. This was very recently published. It's really interesting because it's coming to the conclusion that the natural inclination of wealth in the system in which we are living, it's upward. Which means that only through the distribution that set limits on inequality, we can fix the things. So you need redistribution because the system is working in different direction. The world has changed. By the way, in 1972, we have 3.8 billion people on the planet. Now we have over 8. So from the growth From the limits to growth, we simply move to the growth of limits. And to make our future sustainable, some basic shifts would be needed. First, humans are currently in function of economic development, and we should revert that. Economics should be in function of human well-being. Second, from an economy which is considering humans as external and superior to nature, we need to move to an economy where we will consider ourselves as part of nature. Third, we need to move from extraction-based production to a creation-based production. Stop stimulating extraction-based economic success. Reward responsible, innovative, creative ways of human needs, and move from an egoistic, short-term based interest governance structures and logic to cooperation and sharing sovereignty. When any policy leader will tell you we have to keep our sovereignty, kick his ass immediately, because he's leading you in the wrong direction. We need to share sovereignty, otherwise we will not manage the challenges. It's impossible. Is this attractive to business? Because many times we are hearing that that is not the case. These are top 10 risks identified this year in Global Risk Perception Survey of World Economic Forum. In 10 years, number 1, failure to mitigate climate change. Second, failure to climate change adoption. 3, natural disasters and extreme weather events. 4, biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse. 6, natural resource crisis. So it's more than obvious that they do understand that and that they want to go in that direction. But we need to create conditions that the business will move. Sometimes, many times, they are more visionary than actually the policy, which is trying to protect what is unprotectable. Transformation is not only about environmental sustainability. So access to natural resources was always the reason of the well-being achieved by the nations. Access to land, water, oil and gas, minerals, precious metals. That's why the whole history of the colonialization of nature, if we can call it like that, is the central to fairness and equity question today. And changing this relationship with nature is ultimately not only environmental, but also equity, security imperative to strengthen collective resilience, which means that it will be either resolved in cooperation and with the wisdom or in a hard and painful way. There is no third option at all. So the future will be green or there will be no future. There are last 3 slides. Lessons learned from COVID are super interesting. Why? Because actually we learned that we act if we consider something seriously. We act a bit late and only when all other options are exhausted, but we act. We would never be in a possibility to work from home without the COVID. You remember that message, Soren. And also, if you would ask yourself a simple question, how many of your clothes you were wearing during the COVID comparing to period before, you would get a very clear answer. And ask yourself, were you happier or less happier? So, last summer in Slovenia was terrible. So it was climate change par excellence. So the point is that today Slovenia is dealing with approximately few points of our budget costs. So the costs will come. We cannot avoid them anymore. It's only one question. Are we ready for the solidarity ex post or solidarity ex ante? That's the only question. So, as I promised you, I will finish with the quotes from my previous country, so ex-Yugoslavia. It's actually from Alan Ford. That was a comics which all of us were reading, and it's very nicely explaining the current economics and the thinking. It's basically going like that. It's not the problem to drive without the brakes. The problem is to stop. And that's where we have a problem. And the last slide is from most important Belgium, that is Hercule Poirot, when once he was asked why he is speaking about himself only in the third person, his reply was something like that: if one is such a genius like me, it's very important to establish healthy distance to himself. So that's actually our task. Let's establish that healthy distance to ourselves, and let's think also a bit more humanly to what is coming and with whom we are sharing this planet. Sorry for being a bit longer, but I hope it was useful. Thanks.